Hello, everyone. Alistair Gold here. So, raise your hand if you've been shouted at by the Tottenham Hotspur manager in the past 24 hours or so. It's been such a weird time. Do you know what? I've probably covered more than maybe more than 1,000 press conferences during my kind of time as a sports reporter and also a news reporter before that, across various levels of football, across various things, even criminal press conferences, things like that. Not actually the criminal doing a press conference, but police press conferences. I don't think I've ever been involved in a more remarkable press conference than I was inside the bowels of St Mary's Stadium late yesterday. Honestly, I've seen funny managers, irritated managers, disappointed managers, bewildered managers, managers pretty much in utter despair. But I don't think I've ever seen someone just offload so much anger over the case of kind of a 10-minute, pretty much. Yeah, it was 10 minutes with literally barely us getting questions in between just to even, it was almost like each question was like he used it to propel himself, Antonio Conte, to even kind of more angry heights. It was incredible. It really was. It was, it'd been a weird, mad game. I don't think any of us expected. There weren't many of us even in there. I'd say there were about 4 or 5 journalists in there and a few operating cameras at the back. And yeah, and it was so weird because the irony is he actually walked into because he was really late. We were waiting a long time after the press conference, and he walked in and he apologised for being late because, God, what time? Probably would have been till after 6 o'clock. So a good hour after the game had finished or more. It was a long, long wait. And he apologised before he came in. And that was the last kind of anything apologetic we were going to get because, wow. He had no apologies for anything else whatsoever that came out of his mouth. It was fascinating to watch. I can't lie. You all know that I kind of grew up a Spurs fan, so I had that element of watching it with a slightly element of the Spurs fan, but I've also watching it and involved in it, asking questions as a reporter and with my journalist head on. Honestly, someone asked me on Twitter afterwards, was like, were you stunned by it? I don't think I was stunned. I was more just, my brain was thinking, whoa, this is amazing. It was just, look, it was just Conte unleashed. I think that's probably the only way to say it. We've seen press conferences where he's been quite honest and upfront before, and he said some good stuff, and you thought, okay, this is a good press conference. Often it'd be after defeat. So I remember against Mura away, we actually stood by the side in that press conference room while the local journalists were in the seats, and that was a really interesting press conference as well. He was quite open and honest, but that was early in his reign after he came to Spurs. Then, of course, we had Burnley. Burnley was more of a, how do I put that press conference? That was more of a one where he was kind of suggesting, or maybe it's my fault. I remember asking him a question. He was like, well, maybe I'm the problem. It was more like a threat almost. And we'll talk about that, the different kind of ways Conte uses the media. And sometimes it's very natural. Sometimes it might be a bit premeditated. I do think there was elements of both about what happened yesterday. But yeah, this was not like Murray or Burnley. This was, he was in full attack mode, full self-preservation mode. He was like someone that, when they're just kind of, and they're doing that, and he was just, that's probably unfair. He's probably swinging. He was just swinging at everyone around him pretty much. Although, as I'll say later, he later, I think, tried to step back slightly on some of the comments, which I don't think he can really do, but it's just my opinion. But my goodness, the fallout is going to be remarkable. And look, anyone at Spurs that hired Antonio Conte that didn't expect that this might eventually happen. I'm sorry, but you're a bit daft. You're more than a bit daft, because we all knew at some point he was going to explode in some way like this in a press conference. We knew it. I think I may have even said it way back in one of the videos, either the first time when the talks failed or when he was actually appointed. It's just one side you are going to get with him. He has, I don't know what we call it, a meltdown. I think that's probably unfair on him because, like I say, it was very coherent. There was a lot of thought behind it. That's why I didn't even really want to describe it as a rant. It kind of was, but on the whole, there was a lot of truth to it, I think. I would say there was a lot of truth to it. I think there was a lot of sense to it. I do also think there was a massive avoidance of his own part in any blame, which, unfortunately, I was going to say it's a Conte way. I'd say it's most managers' way. Even Poch was like this. I know there's a lot of affection towards Poch, and myself included, but it was very difficult for Pochettino to kind of to put to him, maybe you're doing something wrong, and he would get quite annoyed at stuff as well. So it's definitely, I guess when you're a top manager, you're up there in the world game, you've got to have the ego that goes with it, and I guess that's what comes with this. But yeah, if anyone at Spurs thought he was going to go quietly into the night, I'm sorry. Have you met Antonio Conte? It was honestly, the press conference finished, I mean, to be fair, it was the last question anyway. It kind of, I think, on clips that I've seen and stuff, it looks almost like he's decided the press conference is over. To be fair, it was already said, this is the last question. There was only 4 questions. I asked the first one, and then the next 3 came from Evening Standard, Sun, and Daily Mail. I might have got those the wrong way around, the last 2. But yeah. So yeah, it was very much he kind of got to the end of his last question. He was like, "Thank you," and walked out. That was weird. The drive back, I drove back with George Sessions from the Press Association. It was so weird on the journey back, hearing the press conference we'd just been involved in being played back on the radio. And then when you get in and then you see, although I didn't actually see it till this morning, Match of the Day showing clips of it, it's such a strange thing to kind of look back on, and it's probably going to end up being one of the most remarkable nights of his tenure, and I don't think that's a good thing. He'll want to be known for more than being the angry man in the press conference. But honestly, it was, you can probably tell, it's like after the final whistle, I was so kind of like, oh, I've got to write about that. They've absolutely chucked it away. What I've got to write about, I'm going to talk about that is a game they should never have lost in a million years. And then the press conference absolutely took everything I'd kind of been thinking of and was going to write or talk about, and just went slap, and just it's all completely changed because everything now has this completely different dynamic on it. It was furious, it was emotional at times. He was shouting at us. As I said at the top of this, I was shouted at. And I would say, because my first question, if you weren't aware or you haven't seen the transcript, so my first question, it's kind of like, I wanted to get the penalty thing in there, but I wanted to make sure that wasn't an excuse. So I think my first question was something along the lines of, so obviously the game ended with that controversial penalty, but at 3-1 up with 15 minutes, you've got to be winning that game. To which he was actually quite good. He took the penalty, he just went, yeah, it was never a penalty, but we stopped there. There's no more talk about penalties. And then he went, boom, and then he went, the players are selfish, the players are this, they think about themselves. And we knew that part was coming because we'd seen little snippets of quotes from his BBC and Sky interviews, I think they were. So we knew he was coming in with this rhetoric. He was coming in with this, I'm going to talk about them being selfish. So I wasn't surprised that went in there. But then, yeah, you could see him working himself up. And then with each passing question, he kind of bounced in these different directions, which I'm going to talk about. Because I guess this is the good thing about, I suppose that I can talk about is having the insight because I was there and I was asking the questions. So I'm kind of trying to guide you through each a little bit and the way it actually felt in the room and kind of because it's very different. I think sometimes what people will see the quotes, sometimes people will see snippets of the press conference, but maybe you don't get the entire context and stuff like the context, Antonio Context. Yeah, and the weird thing is I saw this morning that was it actually? I'm trying to remember who said it on Match of the Day. They were saying like, did he say all this to his players? The answer, as far as I understand it, is no. Apparently, he did the thing that we've spoken about before, where he's so angry he just doesn't talk to them, and he did not talk to his players in the dressing room afterwards. So he kind of been pensing it all up, and saving it for us, pretty much. And my goodness, did he unload? And yeah, from what I understand, that dressing room anyway was like near silence. I don't think there was anything coming out of there whatsoever, really. Anyway, but yeah, there's rights and wrongs to that. People might say, and I think that was the theme on Match of the Day, from what I could tell this morning, was that you say all these things to the players, don't say them to the public, or if you're going to do that, do both. So at least you're not slating them. Sorry, behind their back, because they all know it's happening. But yeah, he was so angry with it all. That late collapse, and that makes it 40 goals that Spurs have conceded in the Premier League. That's disgraceful. That's the worst tally of any team in the top 12. Forget your top 4s, top 6s, whatever. Top 12. To put this into a little bit of context for you, Crystal Palace sacked Patrick Vieira this week. Crystal Palace have conceded 6 fewer goals than Tottenham in the Premier League this season. That's how bad that defensive stat is. And I absolutely understand when people are saying, but you didn't feel like you needed to buy another centre-back. I get it. I absolutely get it. Not me personally. I didn't buy one. But the thing is, and this was my feeling as well, and kind of Conte touched on it afterwards, was that at 3-1 up with 15 minutes to go, there was no confidence that the game was going to be seen out among any of us in the press box either. You could tell. Kind of Southampton players did this new, what seems quite a fashionable thing to do. He said afterwards, Ruben Sellers came in, so it was a press conference. I think he said it was a Swedish team that they saw do it. So after they concede a goal, they suddenly all do a huddle. I think maybe Arsenal did the other day, or someone did it as well. I think maybe it was against Sporting, perhaps. I can't remember. But the main idea is they scored the goal and they conceded the goal, and suddenly they did this huddle, and the crowd just suddenly kicked up as well. They didn't really go within themselves, within their shell. The crowd actually kind of picked up as well. And he just kind of felt like, this doesn't feel like it's a kind of a commanding, dominant Tottenham here. And they crumbled. They did. How many times have we been talking about Spurs crumbling? And that's pretty much was the main thing that Conte was kind of taking aim at afterwards. It's become part of the culture of the club. An attitude that's like permeates through the corridors of the club. And among all the players. And look, we all hate the tag. The club despises the tag. The players hate the tag. But if you're going to be called Spursy and then you're going to go and do things like that, that tag's not going to go away anytime soon. It's not. It's difficult to disprove that label, isn't it? When that's the kind of thing you're going to go and do. It does. It's like this fear of the inevitability of failure, and it's like no one seems to just be brave enough to kind of, or have the courage to just remove it, whether that is from the top, whether it's from the manager, whether it's from the players, just someone just going in and going, what is this? Like, why do you do this? Why do you just have this kind of self-destruct button that you push? And you saw them sitting further and further, deeper and deeper and deeper as that game wore on at 3-1 up. Whether that's the manager telling them to do that, or whether Kane has said before that, yes, at times they naturally just, and for some reason, the players decide to sit back deeper. I think we've all saw a little bit they showed in their analysis on Match of the Day, where there was suddenly was it 5-4-1 the formation had switched into? At 3-1 up? Why are you 5-4-1? At 3-1 up? Why? It's just mad. It's maddening. It's draining, isn't it? It's like, how many times can we have the same conversation about the same thing happening? It's mad. And Conte said, I saw in his Sky Sports interview, he said, today we were winning 3-1 and I felt the perception that anything can happen. Sorry, not I. Today we were winning 3-1 and felt the perception that anything can happen and we're scared. It's true. It's true. You cannot deny that. And at his press conference, he kind of took that a step further and he spread it across the club. And this is, you'll have seen some of these quotes. He said, I can't do it with the anger. And he'd like answer a question from, like, say, Dan from the Evening Standard, and he'd look at me as well, or he'd look at other people. He was like, I wanted to make sure that all of you know that this is my thought. And he would raise his voice, he'd get louder and louder, he'd shout. If you watch the video, it was very noticeable in the room when we were there. He kept banging the desk, kept banging it with his finger, and there was one microphone on the end that he kept fiddling with. He kept moving it, he kept pulling it around, almost like a mouse next to a computer. He just kept moving it around. I don't know whose microphone that was, but I'd be fascinated to know whether their sound quality was like that, get whacked the whole time, because he kept moving it all over the place. He was like just so wired and just hyperactive. So yeah, this is what he said about the culture of the club. He said they are used to it here. They are used to it. They don't play for something important, yeah? They don't want to play under pressure. They don't want to play under stress. It's easy in this way. Tottenham's story is this. 20 years there is the owner and they never won something. But why? The fault is only for the club or for every manager that stays here? I have seen the managers that Tottenham had on the bench. You risk to disrupt the figure of the manager and to protect the other situation in every moment. Until now, I tried to hide the situation, but now no, because I don't want to see what I have seen today, because this is unacceptable and also unacceptable for the fans. They follow us, they pay for the tickets, and to see the team another time have this type of performance is unacceptable. We have to think a lot about this. And yeah, absolutely all of that. Spot on for me. I don't think there's any disagreeing with that. It's quite interesting that we all decided on listening to it back. Initially, our transcript, when we were writing it up, it just said the fault is only for the club or for every manager to stay here. And we all decided on listening to it back. The way he said it, it definitely was a question. So everyone, you'll see in all the transcripts, if they've done it correctly, it has a question mark. So it is the fault is only for the club or for every manager that stay here. He was very much asking that. He's kind of trying to say, is it everything? Is it literally something that, like I say, permeates across the whole club, and the players are a big part of it as well? Yeah, some things he did stray a little bit from the truth on. So I may have even read this out. I think I probably did in the last video. So after the win against Forest a week ago, a week's a long time, he said in his post-match press conference to us, one of his lines he said is, today in my players I have seen the fire in their eyes. Very much, I have seen the fire in their eyes. It was very clear he said that. We all listened to it back as well. So he was asked, I think it was Dan from the Daily Mail. Dan from the Sun, I think, asked this. He said, so where's that fire gone? What's changed in the space of a week? Conte then decided, I'm going to rewrite history a little bit on what I said. And he's done this before. He did this when I asked him a question in a pre-match press conference recently. I can't remember what it was, but he kind of just immediately went over that. No, I didn't say that. I said the opposite, and kind of thing. And this is what he did yesterday. So very much, remember, the quote was, today in my players, I have seen the fire in their eyes. And so what he said last night when that was put to him, I said that I wanted to see the fire, not that I have seen. It is different. I said that I want to see the fire in their eyes and their hearts. I want to see the right spirit, okay? Not only in the training sessions, on the pitch, because here you have to make the difference. I'm not saying this, and until now I tried to hide the situation, but now there are 10 games to go and some people think we can fight. Fight for what with this spirit, this attitude, this commitment? What? For 7th, 8th, 9th? I'm not used to this position. I'm really upset, and everyone has to take their responsibility. Not only the club, the manager and the staff, the players have to be involved in this situation because it's the time to change this situation if Tottenham want to change. If they want to continue in this way, they can change the manager, a lot of managers, but the situation cannot change, believe me. So yeah, everything after that, there's a lot of fair points to it. But yeah, above that, I think it didn't quite fit his narrative that he'd said last week that the fire was back. It kind of, it didn't quite fit what he was trying to say. If he was saying, these players are selfish, they don't care about anyone. Oh yeah, but last week you said they kind of did and they were all fighting for each other. It was, that's just a portion. We've got more of the stuff to kind of delve into that he said as well. And it's just interesting that on Thursday in the pre-match presser, he was actually coming out and saying that he didn't believe the club had been thinking of sacking him at all. And he'd actually only been joking after the Champions League exit to Milan about the possibility that they might get rid of him earlier. It's a cracking joke. Because no one was laughing now at all, 48 hours after saying that. I think for me, the key words that he came out with that I think there's two elements, two people that he didn't want to cross. And the first, of course, is his employers, the board. I just feel with the line, Tottenham's story is this: 20 years there is the owner and they never won something. But why? While I understand it came within the context of him trying to defend the club as if to say it's the players' fault. It's always the players are letting them down. He was just highlighting what we've all spoken about. And, it's very deliberate that he's used 20 years, I think, as well. Because, you could argue Spurs won the FA Cup in 91. So they've actually only won one trophy in, 32 years. But of course, we all speak about it, and understandably, we all say they've only won one trophy in the last, 21, 22 years, because we're talking about the ENIC ownership and the Daniel Levy chairmanship. And I just felt for him to say that, what I understand is after all of that, he had, clarified his comments to the board. And said, look, I was talking about the players, or certainly he wanted it made known to the board that he was talking about the players, not them. But I just think by even mentioning the whole 20 years, and he actually said no trophies. I mean, there's a League Cup. We all enjoyed it at the time. It's not a major trophy. I wouldn't regard it as a major trophy. I would not turn my nose up if they went and won it, seasons to come. But I still don't think we can say that was a glorious major trophy even that they won in that. And maybe that's what he's saying. No trophies. Maybe he means only the major ones. I just think the fact that he, in a press conference that is being picked up everywhere, that will be shown across the world. We only see it on our, on BBC or whatever, and hear it on radio stations, but that'll have been viral across the internet. In other countries, on their sports shows and stuff, they'll have been talking about Antonio Conte going mad after the match. And so within that, and all the clips being played, it being said, these owners have never won anything in 20 years. Regardless of what he was trying to say, they won't have liked that. They won't have. These are people that don't like being pointed out what they've done wrong, clearly. Otherwise, they would change a lot of things they do. He was highlighting 2 decades worth of a lot of, I guess, failures. Failures to win trophies in each season. Failures to make the right decisions with managers. Failures to make the right signings, I suppose, as well. He was really pointing out their shortcomings. And like I say, this is a club that doesn't like that. They don't. So he's saying his idea is he's saying it's the players, and it was very much. I think it's fair. I'd say it was 80%, 70%. a kind of a diatribe about his players. I'd say it was a 30% about the culture of the club and the whole, I've used it before, meh kind of culture that I think does exist around a lot of Tottenham Hotspur. And the problem for him now, maybe even more so than the board and all of that, could be the players and whether he's burnt bridges there, and how they react to this as well. Because I do think it's fair to place him on the spotlight. You know, you've seen me write this, you've heard me say this a million times. It does annoy the life out of me that when managers get sacked, or a team are in trouble, it's always the manager that carries the can. The same players just kind of go like, just hide in the background, and the manager gets sacked, and they survive another day, and they'll probably play for the next manager. And yes, if you've listened to me from the beginning, you'll know that's something that's always irritated me. So for him to pick up and stuff like that is absolutely right. And I do feel like putting them in the spotlight a bit after that, another embarrassing collapse. I don't think there's anything too wrong with that. The language he used, calling them selfish and not caring about each other, that may be the bit where he stepped over a line publicly. I think that's the kind of stuff maybe you could say behind the scenes. It could have been all very orchestrated. He admitted after the Burnley rant, he admitted that was a bit premeditated, kind of almost to, I think, worry his players that he might leave. Because at that point, he was their big hope. And I think at that point, after that Burnley game last season, he was very much saying, maybe I'm the problem, maybe I need to leave. And it's like, maybe make them think, we don't want to see off a top manager that's done all of this and won all of these things, and then it really will be our fault. I don't think a year on or so, he's got that same, I suppose, pull. It's almost like a carrot and a stick on the stick and a carrot on the stick before, and now he's just using that same stick to beat the living daylights out of them with it. And while I agree with what he said, I just don't know how they're going to react, and I think ultimately they could end up being the deciding factor for him and what happens next. Look, this was his answer to me, that first question, after the bit about the penalty. He said, we are 11 players that go into the pitch. I see selfish players. I see players that don't want to help each other and don't put their heart in. Before today, I prefer to hide this situation and try to speak, to try to improve the spirit, the situation with words. With a lot of situations, because about tactical or technical aspect, this is one situation. The most important thing, if you want to become a strong team, if you want to become competitive, if you want to fight to win, is the desire. The fire that you need to have in your eyes, in your heart, and you have to show this in every moment. In every moment. If I have to compare to last season and this season, we have to improve, but now we are worse in this aspect. When you are not a team, anything can happen in any moment. Today is the last situation. I think he means the latest, maybe that. I don't know, it means last straw. I don't know. Don't forget that in the FA Cup, we lost to Sheffield United, who played with young players. We were able, with a strong team, to be dropped out of the FA Cup. And then a lot of situations, I repeat, that we are not going to improve. And I'm not speaking about tactical aspects or technical aspects. It's about being a team. Being a team. Being a team. It is the most important thing. To understand that we play for the badge. We have to play to make our fans proud of us. We've heard that phrase before. We have to play to show desire. The fire in your eyes to win. If you have this, for sure, you don't go out of the FA Cup. Today, you win. We have to play to make our fans proud of us. We have to play to show desire. The fire in your eyes to win. Oh, wait a minute, that's repeated. I've got the same line in. Maybe previously in the other games, something can change. But here, we're used to it for a long time. The club has the responsibility for the transfer market. Every coach that stayed here has the responsibilities. And the players? The players? Where are the players? In my experience, I can tell you that if you want to be competitive, if you want to fight, you have to improve this aspect. And this aspect, I can tell you, in this moment is really, really low. I see only 11 players that play for themselves. That, again, it's that last line. He's going for all of them. So let's, if you're Harry Kane, how are you taking that? If you're, I don't know, let's say Oliver Skipp, how are you taking that? If you're Ben Davies, who came off yesterday, how are you taking that? It's a really fascinating kind of what comes next, the fallout. I used the word earlier. Fallout is the best word to use, really. He was going for every single. No one was really spared his wrath. He didn't really he could have picked. He mentioned Fraser Forster at one point. Maybe you could argue, but when you're saying 11 players, you are very much going for all of them. And the problem for him now is it's not like today or tomorrow that they can kind of come together and discuss it and really hammer it out. Have another one of those meetings where they all air their grievances and try and kind of just get things off their chest, because now they've all scattered off in their different directions. To most of them go international football. For those players stuck at Oxford Way, they're going to be like slinking in. I don't presume maybe they'll be given a couple of days off so everyone can cool down a bit. But when they come back in, it's going to be like Clement Longley, ooh, where's Antonio Conte? It's going to be so awkward. And if I'm one of those players as well, and I'm cheesed off with whatever the manager said, and then I'm going to work with another manager for a few days, I'm talking to new faces, new people. That's what they're going to be talking about, and they're going to be asked about it by those other people as well. Being called selfish, playing for themselves, and having their commitment to the club questioned. And this is the problem. If you could argue, looking into that he's essentially saying that he can't motivate the squad. That's kind of what he's saying in there. He is digging out the players, but he's also kind of suggesting that he doesn't have that ability to make them show that desire and fight anymore. And that is his job. I can't dance around it. You can't look, like I say, as much as I agree with a lot of the stuff he said about the club and the culture of the club and the players, ultimately it's the manager's job to get what he has playing better and believing in themselves and wanting to fight for him and the club. And is he doing that? It looks like no. And that's what makes it so awkward. I mean, the players might look on the fact that while he was away and recovering in Italy, they won those 3 big games at home, didn't they? Man City, West Ham, Chelsea. They won them without him. Obviously, he played a little part in them in certain ways. And you could argue that they only lost the 2 in the week that they knew he was coming back at the end of it, maybe. I don't know. I looked a bit into it. In 2023, Spurs have won just 3 of the 10 games that Conte's been present for in the Premier League and Champions League. Lost 5 and drawn 2. And he says it himself, and there's no denying it. Spurs have gone backwards this season. They have. They're not, showing a lot of the aspects that they were last season as well. And let's be honest, they can be desperately dull to watch. I don't think they were dull yesterday, but they definitely had some attacking issues and certainly defensive issues. But they can be dull to watch, and they can rely on individual moments of magic rather than the end product of the system that Conte has installed. And that's a big thing as well. And I think that's just about acceptable if you're bringing in the results. But Conte said himself, it's unacceptable when they're producing performances like that, in which it was a draw, but it felt like a defeat. And I probably will at some point call it a defeat in this video without even thinking about it. And I think it's only compounded by the fact of what Spurs fans see happening down the road. They see, a young team playing good football in a progressive way, infused with this right mentality. And it's kind of, if I'm Antonio Conte, I probably hate what's happening at Arsenal even more, because I think a lot of the things he's trying to have everyone believe that, you need these more experienced players, you need this or that, and you have to be tactically compact in this way, and you cannot be adventurous in your play and things like that. they're making a bit of a mockery at that, Arsenal. You know, I do agree with him in some aspects of what he says about tactics and players and things like that. But when you see such, let's be honest, very good football being played, the bulk of the time as well, but also with that underpinning of a bit of a grit, and some of those games they've got themselves through. There's no getting away from it. They've got the mentality. Yet these are players, a lot of them who are young players who haven't been in these situations before. So where did that mentality come from? You know, I think Conte will almost have you believe that you've got to kind of bring that in, maybe with experience. I don't know. But I would actually say the experienced players that he's brought in, the likes of Perisic, I'm intrigued to know whether he was really referring to Perisic, because Perisic obviously scored his first goal for the club, but I thought there were some moments when he was horrendous again defensively. And, you know, is he selfish? Is he playing for himself? Is one of his old guard doing that? It's very interesting, if we get another press conference with him, to understand and delve a little bit deeper into what he meant by some of these things, rather than, obviously, the press conference was brought to a close last night. But yeah, why does playing good football and winning and having a tough mentality, why do they have to be all mutually exclusive kind of thing? Why can't you have all of the above? I don't know. I mean, you look at a lot of the teams that have won the league in England probably since Conte won it, and I'm trying to think, most of them all played really nice, exciting football. And don't get me wrong, Spurs have scored goals. You know, they've scored a lot of goals this season, scored more goals than they did last season. And this, you know, we're talking about a match that finished 3-3. But, I mean, we are going to talk about it, but I still feel like even then, they weren't... the goalkeeper the goalkeeper didn't have a save to make other than those 3 goals. I know that sounds ridiculous in a 3-3 game, and yes, they should have won with 3 goals anyway, and that is on the defence. But it's just quite interesting that the goalkeeper was never tested at all apart from those 3 goals. And against the team that are bottom of the home form table, they should be absolutely peppering that goal. Eric Dyer, I'm going to have some quotes from you in a little bit, him talking about that. But the defence have to look at themselves as well. This is what I mean. This is why I don't like it when I see, on social media, and I know that's not the barometer. People sometimes get annoyed when I mention social media, but it annoys me when I see people saying that you can only believe in this or that or that. There's only one view, and if you don't believe in this one, you're part of the problem. If you don't believe in this one, you're also part of the problem. No, it can be all of the above, and I will maintain this, that the board and Daniel Levy have got a lot to answer for the last 20 years in terms of the lack of success on the pitch and the lack of silverware. I also think that they can't do everything on the pitch, so I think the managers involved have also got things to answer for, and just as much I think the players have as well. I do think that the blame is everywhere. Yes, there is one common denominator, and we will come back to that, as we always do, is the ownership, and is the chairman. But it is so much to it. This is why I find it funny, to be honest, when people say that I'm like pro or anti or whatever any camp. I'm not. I'm really not. I'm actually meant to be objective as a journalist anyway, but I'm actually, when it comes to this, I think everyone's at fault. I'm not quite Conte. I was going to say, I'm like Conte. I'm shoving the blame out everywhere. But Conte doesn't blame himself, so no, I'm not sure about that. But what I found fascinating, and this is one of the flaws I felt in what Conte was saying, is that he's just got this thing where he refuses to accept that his uncertainty about his situation in the future might have any impact on those players. And that, I find, that's a real lack of self-awareness, or it's deflecting, one of the two. Because for me, how can you criticise players not playing for the club, not showing the desire to fight for you or the club or whatever, when they have no idea whether you really want to be at the club or not? And actually, let's be honest, they probably assume he doesn't want to be at the club and he is going to go in the summer, because he never talks about his future. He never gives us any real clarity. And if he does kind of edge towards anything, it almost makes it sound like he doesn't really want to be here beyond the end of the season. It's all very well saying, I'll kill myself for this club until the end of the season. That's great. But a lot of those players are thinking, yeah, well, I'm going to be here beyond this season. Kind of, why should I play for you? And this was Dan from the Evening Standard tried to ask him this. He said, what did he say? Essentially, yeah, does the uncertainty over your future, though, have any part in them not playing a part? And he literally got to the end of, does your uncertainty over your future, though, play any part? And his eye contact went bang, straight in there. And this was when the press conference went from annoyed in his long answer to me to a whole new level of angry. Absolutely shot it down. He's like, you're finding an alibi, another alibi. And he was just getting angry. His voice was raising further and further. You try to find an excuse for the players. Okay, continue to do this. Find an excuse for the players. You do only this. You do only this. Excuses for the players. But the players, maybe, my future. And then we lost confidence. They lost spirit. They lost being a team. It's excuses, excuses, excuses. Try to protect them every time. Bah. They even said bah. We've all got it in our transcripts. He actually said the word bah, which is, I loved it. Come on, come on, come on. We are professional. The club pays a lot of money. The players receive money. Me, I receive money. You understand? Not to find excuse or not to show spirit or show a sense of belonging or don't show a sense of responsibility because we're showing this. For me, this is unacceptable because for me, this is the first time in my career to see a situation like this. Until now, I wasn't able to change, not to change, but compared to last season, the situation went to become worse. Yeah, honestly, seeing him just get redder and redder, I think he might be feeling better because he certainly had the energy to go into it. And I didn't agree with it. I didn't agree with this kind of, if you're saying that I am anything to do with this and you're giving the players an excuse. No, not really. You're saying that they're not playing well as well, but you're also saying that there are going to be some underlying circumstances to this. And as he says himself, he gets paid very well indeed. And for a manager who gets paid at that kind of world-class level, they should be able to provide, I guess, a world-class ability to affect the players and impact them. And, it was only... Was it last season he was saying that he actually felt this was like the best group of players he'd ever worked with in terms of their mentality. What did he do to them over a season? What happened? I'll tell you what it is. It's probably because last season they wanted him to stay and were trying to fight to keep him to stay. And this season he hasn't probably really shown any interest in staying. And that's fed into the mentality in the group. So yeah, while I agreed with a lot of what he said, and I can understand why some people are championing what he said and things like that, this absolute inability to look at himself having had any role. I know it's like a token gesture at one point. He says everyone's to blame. I think he said the manager, the players, everything. I don't think he actually believes that. I don't genuinely think he actually thinks he has had any role to play in the negative impacts of or aspects of this season whatsoever. I think that's mad. It is a bit mad. And like I said before, very much last season it was a case of, if you want me to stay, prove it. And that was the way he kind of spoke to him, especially after that Burnley game. And now he's just whacking him with that stick. And there's no carrot. There is no carrot dangling on the end of it. There's not. He even said in his BBC interview, there's one line that I picked out: the fans deserve much better than this team. I mean, some of the fans are saying they deserve much better than Antonio Conte. It's such a fascinating... This is what I love about it. This is why I'm not kind of, I suppose, getting down about it and crazy. And I must stress, it's really weird that all of this is happening, this chaos. Tottenham are fourth. Yeah, they might not be soon because they've got the Newcastle games in hand and can catch them up. But Tottenham are fourth. It's so weird. How is this chaos happening around a team that's in fourth? It maybe goes to show just how bad the league has been below those, probably the top two, you'd say. It's just madness. And at the time of recording this, the only players I've seen say anything on social media have been Pedro Porro and Christian Romero. Porro's was very much, obviously, he scored his first goal for the club and how he was sad about the result, but obviously it was lovely to score his first goal. Romero's was the interesting one. Romero, for me, it almost felt like a bit of a response to Conte. Almost felt like one. I'm not going to say it was, because that's not fair, but the way I'm going to read it, it kind of touches on some of the aspects that came out in that press conference. So he posted up on Instagram. He said, there are many things to improve, but we will not get tired of trying. We will get up and try again. I love the players of my team. I love them and my club. I know what we're going to do. I know that we are going to move forward, and the time and work all together will tell us where we will go. I've been here for a short time, but we're going to be together to achieve important things. More years may pass, but we'll try. And there's just little bits in that, you can extrapolate out of them. Like, I love the players of my team. I love them and my club. As if, is that a riposte to, they're playing for themselves and not their teammates, and they don't care about the badge. Is he talking about, he essentially saying that he expects to be here for years to come? Is that in contrast with Conte, who they don't think is going to be years to come? It's fascinating little bits and pieces that you can kind of take from it. And look, from the match, there were a few scattered little positives around that you can take if you want to take some from it. I mean, like I say, Porro and Perisic both scored their first goals for the club. Both were really nice goals. Porro's was a lovely finish. Perisic was like a nice kind of half-volleyed bouncing finish. Sonny got his 50th Premier League assist. Great kind of milestone for him. And it was a lovely ball to Porro. Such a good ball. And he's still on 99 Premier League goals. And I think he goes second if he does that. I think he might already be second behind Harry Kane in Premier League goals for Spurs. Which is a hell of an achievement, especially for someone who isn't an out-and-out striker and has played in different positions and out wide. So he did that. Harry Kane, talking of him, 21 goals now in 27 Premier League matches, despite that team he's playing in, the inconsistencies that they bring. I actually, because where we you sit in St Mary's, we don't get the replay monitors. There's a couple of tiny ones dotted about, but I had no chance. So if I couldn't kind of get a little replay quickly on the internet, I was just having to assume or take what I did from my first viewing of my own eyes with it. And actually, one of the goals that I felt was even better when I finally got to see it properly was Harry Kane's header. It's a brilliant header. The way he takes it and he guides it is so good. 21 goals in 27 Premier League matches, which in a non-Erling Haaland era would be seen as a terrific season. I think it still is, and like I say, Skippy, I felt he put in another all-action display. His passing got a little bit ragged towards the end, but I looked up his stats: 4 tackles, 1 interception, 1 clearance, 1 block shot, 2 key passes as well in the Southampton half. I thought Kulusevski was quite bright for a lot of the stuff he did. Obviously, he was thrown on just 4 minutes in for Richarlison as well. Provided the assist for Kane, didn't he? Actually, that goal I was just talking about, that was his cross. He set up a couple of chances in the first half. I think one for Porro. I'm trying to think who the other one was for. Oh, Dyer. I think he crossed in for Dyer to head wide as well. Had a shot of his own, I think, as well. If I remember, it was maybe blocked. And then, of course, actually, it was his cross that caused all the problems that led to Perisic's goal as well. Fraser Forster made a couple of big, I guess it was a big save because Spurs could have lost the game towards the end, and he looks like he's got his England recall as well because of his recent form. So, although I asked about him pre-match, and Conte very clearly said, yeah, he's done well, but Hugo's coming back in. I don't know. I don't know about the whether that needed to be said. I guess it's a nice boost for Hugo Lloris, but I don't know for Fraser Forster. It's like, yeah, you stay in your lane. I don't know if it's was exactly the best thing to say, but hey, yeah, the negatives outweighed the positives though. They really did. Obviously, Richarlison went off after 4 minutes. I don't know at this point what the injury is. I must admit, I'm presuming if they do have some days off, it seems to be a big day off around the club, which is why I think we're not getting any particular kind of massive updates on anything as of yet. This is the funny thing with the international break as well. It gives them a little bit of time to properly mull over things, and and if he's claiming or if he's tried to clarify to the board that he was talking about the players, not them, does that give do the board accept that? I don't know. We'll find out. Who knows? Could get to the end of this video and it might have everything's suddenly turned around and he's gone. But the indications when I started this was it was unlikely to be anything happening today at all. But what does that mean in the modern era? Honestly, there's been times when I've been doing videos and actually I've just realised I haven't even. I normally have my laptop alongside me, and I haven't even got that as well. So anything could be happening while I discuss this, and I could be completely missing out on it. But yeah, what else happened? Ben Davies went off as well. 37 minutes in, that didn't look great for him to come off. That's never a good sign. He's normally one that battles through. The Richarlison one, he looked so upset. He was so kind of head in his shirt. I saw some people saying on Twitter about maybe an injury in the warm-up, but I didn't see that, I'll be honest. We were still kind of working downstairs but while they were warming up. So yeah, I don't know whether that's the case or not. If it is, of course, that's something that's happened before at the World Cup where it was reported that he picked up an injury and then kind of played with it. So yeah, I don't know. Again, I can't really go into that because I don't know if that's the case. It's one that we need a little bit more clarity on. As you can understand, the bulk of post-match yesterday was not really spent chasing injuries and things like that and how things are doing. People are doing. But yeah, the other thing is obviously Southampton lost two central defenders I'll get their names exactly right, Armel Bella-Kotchap and Jan Bednarak. That was horrible, the Bednarak one. He was clearly took a huge whack to his side. It looked like he was being sick. Some people were saying that perhaps he was even bringing up blood. I don't know. How in the world he was allowed to stay on the pitch, I have no idea either. I think they said he went off to hospital afterwards as well. It was not pleasant to watch in any way, shape or form. And as I said earlier, it seems weird to say in a game where they've scored 3 goals, but when you've got a team that have lost 2 central defenders, you probably should be testing the keeper a little bit more than that. The 3 goals, yeah, they did. They came from the only 3 shots they had on target. But yeah, it still should have been enough. They had 1-0 lead, they had 2-1 lead, they had a 3-1 lead. And if the team had defended properly as a unit, they would have seen out that game. Instead, honestly, Perisic and Longley, for the first goal, they were so far out of position, allowing Walcott to run through behind them, squaring for Che Adams, who also got ahead of everyone that was supposed to be chasing him. Actually, I didn't realise until I watched it back today, it just went in off the post. I didn't realise that. From where I was sitting in the stand, it looked like it had gone straight into the net. I didn't even realise it clipped off the inside of the post. Then he had in the 77th minute, Eric Dyer, some unknown reason, decided to step away from Walcott to kind of take up this position on the line alongside Harry Kane. So Walcott was completely unmarked to just take the ball and almost like pass it into the net. It was very strange indeed. Really kind of weird way of defending. And then you had the strange moment at the end when Pape Matar was adjudged to have brought down Ashley Maitland-Niles. It was harsh. It was very harsh for me. Like I said, I don't think this game really should be defined by the penalty. And we were saying afterwards, a few as journalists, like, would Conte have gone that way had they won? Or does his win at all cost mentality, would that have kind of scrubbed that out? I don't know. But the penalty itself, Maitland-Niles for me seems to leap in from behind with his foot raised. And even the contact is like the most minimal thing ever. I was surprised, I'll be honest. And VAR apparently decided it was not. There was not enough there for it to be defined a clear and obvious error by the officials. I felt sorry for Sarr in that one as well. Conte slammed, like I say, to me in the answer, said it wasn't a spot kick. Kulusevski said it wasn't a penalty afterwards as well. Yeah, but neither, to be fair, neither of them used it as an excuse in any way, shape, or form. The damage was just done by Spurs to themselves on the whole, really. Beyond that, like I say, Forster had to make a couple of really big saves as well. There was one from distance, there was one low down, actually, it was a really good save. But he couldn't save the penalty from Ward-Prowse, and I know Ward-Prowse was saying afterwards that he like they're best mates and neighbours, and they used to play football with their kids in the garden, kind of thing, against each other. And it's I think he actually said that he didn't want to even look at him or talk to him before he took the penalty because he would have laughed. And no one was laughing afterwards. Well, maybe apart from Southampton, who very much it would have felt like a win, I guess. Whereas for Spurs, not so much. Yeah, not great at all. And actually, Eric Dyer spoke afterwards. He said, sloppy mistakes. We lost possession easily. We didn't have control of the game at 3-1 when we should have. Really poor goals. We shouldn't let them back into the game. They lost both their centre-backs and we should cause them a lot more problems. We only have ourselves to blame. There will be lots of ups and downs for everybody fighting for the top four in relegation. It will definitely go down to the last couple of weeks of the season. We need to find some consistency. So, yeah, I get it. I got some of the fans afterwards were kind of not delighted about the fact that, Dyer was calling out the attacking players when you could argue they did their job. They scored 3 goals, whereas the defence could not, keep the scoreline where it should have been. So, yeah, and other supporters will say that maybe Dyer epitomises this nearly nature of Spurs and the club's inconsistency, that he's a player that is nearly kind of good enough in each time and will show good performances, but he will also show poor performances as well. And maybe he sums up like what Conte's saying. Maybe that's what certainly the fans weren't happy with him being the man to answer this. But it's one of those difficult ones. It's like he fronted up. It's like, would I have liked to see Harry Kane as captain after the game talking about it, but even putting, or I don't know what I did that, Farmer, talking about the game on social media. He started doing these little kind of 60-second clips on social media where he talks, but they always seem to come after a win. I'd like to see that after a defeat, and I think he'd probably connect with the fans even more if he did that. Not to say that he hasn't got a great connection anyway, singing his name again yesterday, but I think it would be good as a captain and maybe a potential future full club captain. Maybe I'd like to see it. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. So yeah, what comes next? Whatever does come next is going to have to be weighed up very carefully. Like I say, while Conte neglected to put himself in any of the blame game, a lot of the other stuff he said was true. The players have escaped blame for a lot of the years. A long line of managers thrown under the bus for them. I think you'll remember, was I doing the videos when Poch went? I think I probably was. Yeah, I must have been. Or at least I was definitely writing about it all. I remember being so annoyed at the players kind of not fighting for Poch in those last few weeks. It was that was a classic. And there was a lot of players felt very bad after that. There were tearful players after he was out. And I think a lot of that maybe came from I think maybe it was even said, did a couple of players say it in interviews that they felt they'd actually let him down? And the other stuff that Conte said, it's difficult to argue a club that has had a single League Cup to its name in 31 years has any kind of winning mentality. And like I say, from the very top down. And if he has made his position untenable, there's a few journalists after that press conference that were saying that his position has to be untenable now with, the players being outraged and the fact that he was having a pop at the culture of the club. I don't know whether I think it's that far. I think we're going to find out pretty quickly whether it is untenable. I don't think it's one that we'll have to wonder about too long. But, where do Spurs go? If it is decided his position is untenable, what directions they lurch to next? They're like someone staggering, Enoch and Daniel Levy sometimes. They're like someone staggering down a corridor kind of, I'm not going to say drunk, but just staggering down a corridor, and you just don't know which door they're going to fall into. Whatever open door they're going to fall into. And that kind of feels like their managerial search. Is it going to be a project manager? Is it going to be a win now silverware manager that surprisingly can't win now at Tottenham? It's like all of these different types of managers, and none of them have been able to do what they were brought in to do. Well, maybe that's where the problem lies. Maybe they were able to come in and do what they were meant to do. Maybe that was the targets that they were set for them they met. And that was the problem. They didn't have higher targets, maybe. Conte, whether he meant it or not, has drawn attention back on the owners again, very clearly and precisely. And this is the thing. It's fascinating to kind of, how many times have we said that, he has to get the decision right next, Daniel Levy? How many times? Because look, he will pick it, regardless of whatever you hear about Fabio Paratici, the mess surrounding him and everything. Levy is still the man that picks the manager. I think like some aggregator took that out of something I'd written or said before, and everyone was like, well, duh. I was like, yeah, exactly. Well, duh. It is obvious. He is the main boss at the football club. He will make that decision regardless of whatever is beneath him. So what happens next? What are the options? Well, you've got, of course, the temptation might be there to hand Ryan Mason the reins again until the end of the campaign. He did win four of his 6 Premier League games when he stepped in last time. He was only a 29-year-old coach then as well. It, of course, would give the board a little bit of breathing space to look at the full array of managerial options come the summer. But it's a gamble for the short term, putting a very young coach in there at a stage when the top 4 could kind of go either way. And, we know the Champions League and I guess the financial side of it, as well as the other aspects to it, and maybe keeping certain players next season. So it could be a gamble. And also, it could be a gamble for Mason as well, because there's a lot of high hopes for Mason. A lot of praise comes his way, and understandably so from everything I hear. But if he is given the job and it doesn't work out for him, it kind of could end his kind of aspirations to be a manager before they've even begun. It's a big ask, that. I mean, trying to think, when he took over from Mourinho, was it already April, wasn't it, I think? And we're still here in mid-March, so it's a longer spell if they went with him. It really would be. Another alternative is, do they give Conte another game? Do they say, essentially look to see if this was his way of trying to get reaction? Do Spurs go to Everton and show a reaction? Do they show that they're still fighting for him and his words do actually kind of are still getting through to them again? If you want a bigger test as you could possibly get, I think in terms of matching fight for fight, Everton are the team right now. Everton are scrapping away for absolutely everything. And I think, again, if that is the case, we'll very quickly know whether this Spurs squad is still playing for Antonio Conte. It will be very evident very quickly. The other aspect, of course, is luring another manager away from a club. It feels like at this moment that's a tough ask. That is a difficult one, because I'd almost go as far as say near impossible, really, at this stage of the season. So that leaves you, if you're going to make a permanent change now, that leaves you with, the freebies, the people available, the Mauricio Pochettino, Thomas Tuchel, Luis Enrique. I know some people keep throwing Marcelo Gallardo into the mix. I don't know about that. I don't know. I do think I would put him probably in the gamble territory. And, I do wonder why have no other European club gone for him yet? Would Spurs want to be the first ones to try that? I don't know. I'm not saying that he hasn't done terrific things thus far, but still think it's a gamble. I do. And I just wonder whether Spurs at this moment in time are not maybe looking for a gamble, or a gamble would worry them. But even those other three I said, Luis Enrique would be a real glamour appointment. It would fit in with the kind of how do I put it? The win now managers that Daniel Levy is like, oh, hello. It does, but for all of his very impressive stuff he did over 2 seasons at Barcelona, it's maybe the case for saying that what he's done outside his work in Spain, could he be a very expensive gamble, Luis Enrique? And I would say also his passing style and what he would also require a big old overhaul of the squad, an expensive one. That might not be a bad thing at all, but that's a real throwing your eggs into a very different basket for someone that is unproven, I'd say, outside Spain. It was at Roma. Did he pull up trees at Roma? I don't really think he did. I think he did some good stuff at Celta Vigo, wasn't he? And Barcelona, his time with the Spanish national team, it seems to be differing views on that. Obviously, it's a tough era to kind of follow coming in. That's Luis Enrique. Thomas Tuchel, he's the one with the Premier League experience over Luis Enrique. But, is it just let's appoint that boss that Chelsea sacked again? It's another one of those. And as I said before, there's some suggestions that, he would take some considering anyway to come and take it. And then, if he's listened to Conte's rant, his carefully picked words, it might have only strengthened Tuchel's concern about whether he could win anything at Tottenham as well. That leaves Pochettino out of that little group anyway. Look, I've got 2 very different sides to this in my head. If anything could bring together an absolutely disenchanted fan base and a squad lacking in belief, it could well be the very romantic notion of Mauricio Pochettino riding back into town to finally attend to that unfinished business he once spoke of. It's a very romantic notion, and it's one that I think a lot of people would love to see bearing fruit and bringing, what he can bring with him. And, look, no one knows Tottenham Hotspur better than Mauricio Pochettino, I'd say. Those, 6.5 years, was it, at the club? 2014, 2019. Oh, wait a minute. I've lost my whole timeline's completely gone. That was the 2019, wasn't it? So, 5.5 years at the club. That's my mathematics for you. About just under 5.5 years. Look, no one knows him better. All the weird stuff about Spurs, the quirks, the secrets, the problems, the strengths, the weaknesses. He knows it all. He knows that club inside out. And I would say that having spent 4 years away? Yeah, it is. Honestly, I'm struggling with my maths and years today. Having spent that amount of time away, was it November 2019? Here we are. 3.5 years away. He'll be more experienced, more knowledgeable. He's got some trophies on his CV, hasn't he? He's got a league title in France. Yes, I know people don't think that's the highest honour in the world. He's got a couple of cups on there as well. Look, spending 18 months at PSG, which it's a club that makes Spurs look sane. It really does. It's just a crazy, crazy club. I do think all of it will add to the experience that he has and how he would deal with Spurs a second time. I completely agree with people, though, that say, can you ever go back in football? Does it work? I think there are instances. I think you could say Mourinho, Zidane, Capello, Lippi, even Harry Redknapp went to Portsmouth a couple of times and did well. But there are obviously countless tales when managers have gone back and they haven't been able to replicate what they did the first time they were there. there's a big question mark, as I've said before, as well, over whether the Spurs board would be united in wanting him back. There's a big question mark, perhaps the biggest question mark, is whether Pochettino himself feels the time is right to come back to Tottenham. Because, that very cluttered new structure at Tottenham Hotspur, it bears very little resemblance to the one that he left at Spurs in 2009. It's very different. Fabio Paratici has brought in a lot of faces, a lot of names, and whereas before there were like one or two people doing certain jobs, there's like loads now. Sometimes they crisscross over each other, and I saw Dean. There was a report or something that said that Dean Rastrick had left the academy manager. From what I understood yesterday, was the last time I checked, that wasn't the case. He was still part of the club, but there's so many kind of cooks in that kitchen, and even at that kind of the crossover between the academy and the first team, you've got Dean Rastrick, you've got Simon Davies, the chap they brought in, used to be at Man City and with Vincent Kompany as well, and Andy Scolding's kind of around that area as well, brought in from Rangers, very highly rated chap as well, and obviously you've got Greta Steinerson, you've got Fabio Paratici, and then you've got Chief Scouts, is it Gabonini as well, and then you've got, pretty sure that Paratici also has a scout who's like his right-hand man that is mainly based in Italy, whose name's completely gone out of my head. They're all over the place. Obviously, that Jeff Vetterer seems to have had to leave the club after his comments out while scouting as well. And there's just so many people involved. It's like, are there too many cooks in the kitchen? And that's not the Poch way. He doesn't like working in that kind of scenario. This is why I think he didn't like PSG as well, because there was so many voices all having their say. Whereas he, I guess the crux of why he was a success during that 3-year period in the middle of his tenure was that he was able to harness this really tight-knit family kind of atmosphere around the club. It's probably the happiest and most connected the whole club's been for decades. And I include the fans as well in that. But that's the one I'm saying. Is that the big question? Can he recreate that? And if he can't recreate that, does he become a good choice or not? We'll see. We'll see. The international break does, of course, always give you that little bit of time for managerial changes if they are to be made. You can hastily put a plan together, really. Like I said, this explosive tirade that Conte came out with, it was great fun afterwards. All the different journalists coming out with the different expressions they were going to use for their papers. You could see the very different newspapers and who would use different terminology. It was quite fascinating to see. Whereas I'm kind of not bound by that. I'll just say what I feel. But they've obviously got very set kind of language they use, which is quite interesting. But yeah, it's, Conte's put Levy back in the spotlight and his track record. And there's also a case to be made that with his very final words of the press conference, has he actually put on pressure on Levy that if he were to sack Conte or put him on gardening leave, is he actually only underlining Conte's final words of the press conference, which, if you forgot, I said earlier, it is time to change the situation if Tottenham want to change. If they want to continue in this way, they can change the manager, a lot of managers, but the situation cannot change, believe me. So yeah, the ball's in Daniel Levy's court, absolutely now. Once again, he's made big promises to the Tottenham fans in recent years and over all of the years about what he wants to see on the pitch and how, he wants to see it match up with what lies off it. But he's never made it happen either. Like I say, he's lurched from one idea, and I don't know whether is it his thinking? Is it people telling him that that's what he should do? How in the world is the guy that told everyone that he wanted to see attacking, entertaining football at Tottenham Hotspur and made a promise in the matchday programme, then go and appoint Nuno? That was in a response to Jose Mourinho and the football that he obviously didn't like seeing under Mourinho. And he brings in Nuno, who brings in even worse football. And then, he goes on to Conte, who is kind of... Look, I wouldn't say Conte's football is boring, but it's not the free-flowing progressive football that we're seeing a lot of the top teams playing today. I still maintain that when his system has the right parts and when it fires on all cylinders, it can produce some really nice football. But it's so rigid and it's so specific in the players it needs. I do wonder just how easy that is to do, especially maybe at a club like Tottenham that aren't going to pay the silly money to pick the exact perfect person for that position. Yeah, it was weird actually, because despite the growing discontent with Conte, and you see it on social media, and I see it just talking to people, just in and around matches, just in the street actually, when people come up and just want to talk Tottenham. Despite all of that, they were singing, those travelling Tottenham fans were singing Conte's name at the start of the game. They were. Yet, as I think it was the first half went on, they were chanting for Levy out. So, we've said this so many times, but he's got to get his next decision right. He has to. I mean, he may feel, Daniel Levy, that he was vindicated somewhat in picking Conte last time. Conte took him into fourth. And, you could argue, like, this is the thing about Conte, talking about the players. How many of those players who played yesterday were players that were brought in for Conte? You had Longley and Perisic were two of the players that obviously... was Longley the first choice? I don't think he was. Perisic was. But Longley also is someone that Conte likes and has kind of said quite high regard things about. Yet two of those were both highly culpable for a lot of the mistakes that happened yesterday. Who else we got in there? Porro and Emerson are players obviously that he's brought in as well. I think I worked out it was about 6 players who featured yesterday out of the 14 were players that were brought in for him. And then you've got other players who, the likes of Son and Kane and Davies and Skip and Forster and people like that, who it's a big call if you're saying some of those are selfish and not playing for their teammates. It's a big call. So I'd be fascinated to know exactly which players that he was talking about. And I hope we get some clarity on that. If we ever do, we shall see what this next week brings. But like I say, how many times have we said that Daniel Levy has to make the right decision next? But he just does. He needs to prove to a fan base that have been so frustrated and beleaguered for the majority of the 20 plus years he's been in charge of the club. 20 years, 12 managers. He's got to show that he can come up with a solution rather than being the common denominator. Because for as long as Spurs don't win a trophy, and he is the chairman, and ENIC own the club, it will always be seen as him being the common denominator. And it's very difficult to argue against that. And if I'm Daniel Levy, look, I've always said this in the past, I don't know how much awareness there is of their own mistakes at Tottenham. I don't know. I don't talk to these powers that be. I would love to know what goes on in their minds. I would love to sit down and have an interview with them. It would be awesome. But it just would seem strange to not take any kind of share of any blame. It's like, does he regret sacking Pochettino back in 2019? I'd love to know the answer to that. Does he regret some of the choices he's made in managers? Does he regret some of the times when maybe they could have pushed a little bit for a different player rather than the one they ended up with? Do they regret sometimes the way I guess the fans are kind of treated in a way? I'd love to know the answers to these questions, but these are questions that just hang out there in the air. And I do not have the ability to ask these things because, some people might disagree, but I do think I am quite critical of all parties when things are, aren't going well and over a long-term thing. So I don't know whether I'd be the kind of person that would be even deemed worthy of such an interview. But yeah, look, one interview isn't going to fix everything anyway, so I don't know why I'm getting myself into that kind of going down that path. But yeah, we'll see what happens next. Whether the Antonio Conte reign continues or not, by the time this is published, it may not have. I'd be surprised if anything happens today, but stranger things have happened in the world of Spurs. I remember turning off my laptop in that night in November in 2019, and literally my phone went went mad with a million messages and calls, and Poch was about to be sacked. And then I go to bed. I wake up the next morning. I think I worked really late that night trying to piece everything together. And then I wake up in the morning and my phone's like, and Mourinho's been appointed. So anything can suddenly happen, especially with Tottenham Hotspur. But I'm actually fascinated to see what happens next. When George and I got back yesterday from Southampton, after it's about 2.5 hours back, it's not too bad from Southampton, but we just both looked at each other. We just kind of like said the same thing. Like, Spurs are so draining. They do. They kind of drain a lot out of you. They take a lot from you. Probably for everyone involved, not just reporters and especially the fans. But there is a little part of me it's like this little burning interest to see what happens next. See whether this really angry, fiery side of Conte, which partly was self-preservation, but partly showed that he still cares, which is a major thing. I'm intrigued to see what happens with that. And if it goes against him, what does the next era bring? What is it going to be different? How is it going to be able to operate within the culture that Conte just called out? Can it achieve? Can it succeed? Can it do anything? Does there need to be changes above? What will happen with Paratici? As the mess around Paratici, we'll probably find out more about him in the next couple of weeks as well, and with the appeal and other investigations and things like that. You'd imagine that if Conte has got an ally on that board, it would probably be Paratici. And what would happen if he were to depart? What would happen with certain players if Conte were to depart? What does Tottenham Hotspur look like going forward? Can it look any different with the ownership? Can it? Just what happens next? And actually, while being quite drained last night, I do feel quite. Just my interest is piqued by this. I want to know what comes next, and that's obviously going to be my job over the coming week to work out what's going on, what plans are being made, if any. I'm sure there will be, and what comes next, and is it something that are they going to make us proud? That's such a daft expression that it's going to haunt us forever. Yeah, we'll see. But there you go. You can see I'm getting a little bit delirious now. It was a late night. A lot of work. But yeah, let's see what happens now. I've been talking for long enough. I've taken up enough of your time. Of course, happy Mother's Day to any of the mothers out there doing their thing. My mother as well, who I don't think she'll ever watch this. But and my wife is downstairs. I can hear the strains of La La Land. She's watching for about the 1000th time. But yeah, let's see what happens next. Hopefully nothing's changed too much by the time this video comes out and we get a little bit of breathing space for you to kind of digest the things I've said. And of course, it goes without saying that I shall be doing videos within the international break as well and talking about whatever comes up and whatever may come to pass. So, yeah. Right, I'm going to head off now. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday evenings and whatever may come. And yes, as always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you later. Goodbye.